This is Clint Emerson, and this is the Break It Down live show.
That's right. We're live here on the Break It Down show with, so one of the things, just for purposes of background, I've got a lot of combat time. You've been outside the wire probably as much as anybody you know. So I don't want to put the Letterman jacket on and talk too much about that stuff because, we do other things now. I don't know how long it's been since you've been, deployed somewhere, but for me, it's coming up on 10 years here pretty quick. So, which I guess to say that we also can reference back, but let's try to avoid a lot of that back in the teen days kind of stuff, because, you've talked about that in a lot of places. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, I'm curious what your thoughts are with regards to the election. I don't want to get political, but just in terms of, we don't know what's about to happen, right? And guys like us are thinking, do I have my ammo? Do I have my go bag? What am I going to do? Extra protocols when we go to the goddamn store, So what does it look like for someone like you who has focused most of his life on security and preparedness and all that kind of thing? We have such a big unknown. We literally have no idea who's going to win the election. Read 2 articles, you get 2 different outcomes.
Yeah, it is odd, and it should be a pretty interesting week, right? So the next couple of days, I mean, I don't know what it is. For me personally, I can't stand this part of, the 4-year cycle. But at the same time, I'm addicted to it. Right. You want to see, which states are blue, which ones are red. And, there's some entertainment and all that. Certainly the debates have been entertaining, and both candidates have their way of, doing what they do. But yeah, as far as preparedness and all that, I mean, it's been, let's see, just kind of backing up to what you're talking about. I've been retired for 5 years.
Right.
I'm still doing odd and end contract work, from time to time, and still do just to maintain clearances and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for the most part, 5 years since a real deployment, and just hanging out, doing preparedness, trying to get people to be more proactive, preemptive with how they think, along with how they, put things together, whether it's in their vehicle, their home, or, at their desk at work, if they ever go back to work. So it's been, that's kind of been, eating up the past 5 years of my time, and I enjoy it. It's fun. But as far as, I had put out all my books are illustrated. So I put out an illustration the other day of how to survive the election. And so one was, all right, go bury your head in the sand until it's done, which isn't a bad idea. Get completely just shit-faced. That's one opportunity that you could take and just get through it all. And it had some other stuff that were pretty general, but, just tongue-in-cheek ways of dealing with this thing. But I think overall, there's a lot of whoever wins, there's going to be fires everywhere and social unrest. And, I think we thought the same thing the last go around, and there was a lot of that talk going on. And, it was pretty calm. I think overall, you've got to be prepared, not paranoid. Take, the proper steps to making sure that you and your family are safe, and you've kind of thought about everything at least once or twice. But I think for the most part, this country is somewhat civilized enough not to go crazy. And if it does, then just make sure you've got, certain things in place so that you get through it okay.
I'm often asked these kind of questions, because of my background, and I know you must get this a lot, but some of these scenarios, there is just no good answer. If you're driving to go from A to B and then something's in between, your car gets mobbed by a bunch of people, you can't just drive over everybody. What can you do? I literally, when you find yourself approaching a situation where all of a sudden you are mobbed by somebody, or something like that. I mean, for most people, they don't go anywhere near the unrest, right? They're able to avoid it without even being aware that it's even a threat. But what does someone do when they find themselves in an impossible situation where all of the options look terrible?
That's a good question. And, I've talked about it a couple of times. I mean, if you're on foot, the big thing with any of the events, especially if, we all know that social unrest is emotionally charged. When emotions are involved, irrational logical thought goes out the window and people just act. So knowing that, you stay away. If you find yourself on the perimeter of it, then go the opposite direction, go perpendicular to which the flow of traffic is moving. If you find yourself in the middle of it, then immediately you've got to start identifying your outs. You know, how can I get to the perimeter? Move with the flow. Don't go against the grain, because that's not going to do you any good. And then skirt your way to the perimeter so that then you can go perpendicular. I have a rule of putting, you know, you put 2 city streets between you and the social unrest, you know, and then you can kind of reassess and make sure you're safe. When you're in the middle of it, you know, keeping your hands up, right? Non-compliant, or you're more of a compliant negotiator stance. You shuffle your feet. Big thing about keeping hands up is prevent any of that suffocation type injuries where you get crushed injuries. Identify the walls, the barricades, and the dead ends, and don't go near them. Also, the invisible threshold between the people and law enforcement. Stay away from it. Even though you're a good person stuck in the middle of something, you have to assume they're going to hit you over the head thinking that you're a protester. So just stay away from all those law enforcement thresholds, yes, walls, barricades, all of that, right? So now if you're driving and you take a right and all of a sudden you're surrounded by a bunch of people, like you said, you can't do, you know, the Walking Dead move and try and start running people over. That'll do you no good, get you thrown in jail real quick. So you have to just keep it slow and steady. I believe that you've got to keep a little bit of that momentum going. Remember, you are a 3, 4, sometimes even a 6,000 pound vehicle. You have the advantage regardless of what's going on outside. Keep the wheels moving, even if it's slow, it's just a creep. And then try to get off that street as quickly as possible. Personal experience, I was overseas during the height of the Arab Spring. And that's when the Muslim community basically just kind of went, you know, went into very much of a revolution, if you will, in every major country over there. And I took a wrong turn and ended up in, you know, surrounded by 1,000+ people that were angry, emotionally charged. I was in my vehicle and, you know, I was surrounded. The car was tipping from driver's side wheels to passenger. They were trying to tip the thing over. And for me, I saw what I call a set of sympathetic eyes. This guy that had a AK-47 slung over his shoulder, the look in his eyes was that he felt for me. He felt for that position I was in. And so I gave him the international sign of peace, which is this: money, right? Money. You want money? You want money? Come on over here. And he's like, okay. So he went to the passenger door. He held his AK-47 at the crowd near that door, which created a nice bubble, you know, of space. I let him in the vehicle, not knowing exactly how this was going to go.
Yes.
All I had was, you know, I had a pistol. That's it, right? That I'm not even supposed to have. So,
right. Yes.
So he gets in. And then I'm like, point that gun out the windshield. And so he puts it up at the windshield, and then that just opened up the street so that I could just go. And oddly enough, you know, you go 2 blocks down, you take a left, you go another 2 blocks. There was a gas station. We pulled in there, and you could hear the birds tweeting. You know what I mean? Like it was just, there was nothing going on. So it's amazing what creating space will do for you as it relates to safety and security. And on top of that, a little bit of cash in your pocket. Look for those sympathetic eyes and get yourself out of there, whatever it takes. I paid him. He went on his way. And you know, that was that. So some of those same principles obviously apply if you find yourself in that situation. Things that I didn't have because I literally just landed. So my cell phone was dead. I didn't have SIM cards yet for that area. You know, I mean, so a lot of lessons learned out of that. Luckily, I had cash. I had a gun. But, you know, the rest was just adapting to that situation and hopefully making good decisions under stress, which, you know, is never a good idea. You should always, just us talking about this, putting it into your listener, viewer minds. Now they'll think about it. Just by thinking about it, makes you 10 times more effective if something does happen. That's why I always tell people, like, think through all the different scenarios that could potentially happen when you're sitting in your car at a red light, when you're sitting in that restaurant, when you're going into the grocery store, when you go to get your coffee, when you come back home and you're in your driveway. All those points of attack, it's always good to just take a second, think about what you would do if something happened, and you'll be better off for it.
Yeah, and I guess I would say too, like, know where a consulate or an embassy is if you're in another country, because if you are in a situation and you have to do something drastic like drive through a crowd, you don't want the local authorities to put their hands on you, and maybe you can't get to one, but there are points where there are only bad options, and obviously try to avoid that. And I think it's so smart that separation from conflict can be fast. And if they talk about flight or fright, but freeze oftentimes is a very appropriate response too. Like, take an extra couple of seconds and decide, if you are going to fly, which direction is the best? Is it parallel? Is it opposite direction? It's great counsel.
Yeah, no doubt.
I wanted to ask about, so, especially for guys like us, it's really easy to go from being, aware situationally to hyper vigilant. And then, because it's really hard to limit that, right? Like, it'd be kind of a runaway train. And all of a sudden you start to see things that aren't there. I mean, look, as a spy, my peers, it would be like, I'm being followed right now. Like, are you really being followed? Like, I keep seeing the same people. Like, really? Are you? Like, why in the world is someone following a training kid, at a basic level course? We're not talking a high-end course here, Clint. We're talking, basic level course, right? Why is someone following you? But they believe it in their mind. They're so hypervigilant that they lose contact with reality. How does one avoid that? How do you know how to limit when it's okay to just take any seat in the restaurant? You don't have to sit in the perfect seat.
Right. Yeah. I think I always say I think the word situational awareness is overused but underutilized. Right. We talk about it all the time, but nobody really breaks it down so that it's easily digestible and makes sense for everyone. I think our brains are not computers. They cannot aggregate all the information in any given environment, put it in little folders, and then send you alerts when one of those, a threat is standing in front of you. It just doesn't work that way. So I tell people all the time, to balance hypervigilance, all it goes about like knowing what you're going to look for before you walk out the door. So if you're in an urban environment, let's say a downtown congested environment, you're going to be on foot and it's a lot of foot traffic, public transportation, and that's the theme of your day and your pattern of life, then you already know what the threats are. You just have to look for them now instead of trying, because the reality is if you try to pay attention to everything, you actually end up paying attention to nothing.
Right.
And so knowing what the threats are for the area that you're going into ahead of time. And then now, okay, you're basically sensitizing your mind. You're kind of recalibrating it, whether it's urban area or I'm going out in the middle of nowhere, okay, the pickpocketer versus the mountain lion, right? So these are the things I'm going to look for. I'm going to look, consciously feel the bumps going on as I move towards the subway. When I'm on the subway, I'm feeling those bumps. You're paying attention to the things that relate to that environment, vice just trying to look at everything, because like I said, then you see nothing at all when you try to do that. So I think that's number one in controlling that vigilance piece. The other part goes back to what we were anchored to, is all about running scenarios and making sure that no matter where you're sitting in the restaurant, if you can't get the perfect seat, that's okay. You're just you're going to run the scenario based on what you've got. So if I know that, I've just got finished writing another 100 Deadly Skills, the combat edition, and in it is all different fighting systems, right? And so what I found interesting and I thought was pretty cool, and I'll highlight it here, is in the Krav Maga world, the Israelis basically break it down as what's in front of you is the green, what's to your peripherals is yellow, and what's behind you and you can't see is the red zone, right? So green, yellow, red. And you run it like a stoplight. And so your goal is to eliminate the space in the red zone. So let's say I can't get my back against a wall. Okay, well, maybe my table is off the wall and there's a set of people between me and them. That's okay. Now I've identified that, all right, I've got that little bit of gap in my red zone. I feel like I'm pretty good because when I look behind me, every time I look behind me, I've turned that into a green zone. So your goal is keep your head on a swivel and try and create as many green zones as you can without looking like a nut job. So it's but there is a lot of cool systems out there that I think everyone should know about. The OODA loop, we've all heard about that one. You know, that one certainly applies to trying to get inside your adversary's mind and what he is going to do. You've got, you know, Cooper's colors. It's been around for years, but the problem is I couldn't tell you what the difference between, you know, red and orange is right now.
Yeah.
So, like, sometimes when you color code things, you lose sight of what's good and what's bad out of all the colors. But, you know, bottom line is you've got to keep your mind in the game, but give yourself the parameters so that you're not, you know, paranoid or crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's continue on this theme. One of the things I like about the Krav Maga style is that if you do end up in a physical confrontation, you know, it's bottom fist to the nose to smash their nose, thumb to the back of the eye socket, so they don't want to fight anymore. You know, if it's a gun, then you use the gun. If it's a garbage can, you use that. You end the fight as quickly as possible because you don't want to be in an extended fight. But before that, all of that other, you know, all of that escape stuff still applies. When you're running around, you know, day-to-day life, what would you say, like, your level of operational, like, how close are you ready to trigger? Are you like at a 2? Are you at an 8? Like, how do you walk around day-to-day life? If you go to the mall and there's all these variables and everything, where do you sit in terms of not readiness, but, like, you know, what's your combat sense level, I guess is what I would call it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think there's varying levels based on what is the environment. You mentioned like a mall. Malls are great just because you can keep your space between you and the people walking, you know, either in the same direction or the opposite direction. I think, you know, vice where you might be at a movie theater where you're, you know, well, not these days. Now we're all forced to have the but
Right.
you know, I would say pre-pandemic, you know, you see the difference between the public transportation scenario and more of an open,
right,
you know, outside mall effect like that you have on the West Coast, where everything's, you know, the malls on the West Coast don't have ceilings. That's how I always describe, because now when you come to Texas, the malls here have ceilings.
Yeah.
So,
it's too hot there.
Yeah, so you have to, because the weather changes every damn day. But you know, it's I think, yeah, for me personally, because I train, and everything goes back to training. You have to be training your mind, your skills on a regular basis, and because you do it, then your confidence and how you're going to react, even if you're caught off guard, because that is really what you train to. Is the worst case scenario is the element of surprise.
Right.
The element of surprise always exists, no matter how prepared you are, no matter how trained you are. So if you're always training that way, based on being caught off guard and surprised, now you're sensitized to it to the point where you're probably going to be okay. And so because I train it and do it on a regular basis, regardless of the environment, I really just know that and have a certain level there. And I know what I'm carrying. You know, I know that I can both hands are strong hands. There is no weak hand, strong hand. Correct. Right. Both hands are strong. That my left works just as good with a pistol or a fixed blade as my right does. So, and because I carry both, and I know I'm good. If things go really south, I know that I've got my tourniquet and some other items to, you know, as a recovery tools, right? So you think in terms of the preemptive tools, you know, the action tools, and then your post-crisis type tools, then I've got all that stuff. I'm about as maxed out as I can be, and I know I'm good to go because I train all of that on a regular basis. And that's about, you know, that's the extent of it. The rest of the time, you're just kind of running those scenarios from time to time and making sure you know what you're going to do.
Yeah, the last time I went shooting, I went with just a recently retired Green Beret for the audience, and my buddy Johnny Walker. You probably know Johnny. And we did things like we played a game of horse with shooting, and so one of my calls was left hand, left eye, solo grip. because that's not as easy as whatever you do for your home grip. And
Mhm.
it's funny because you could be wearing the middle of the target out and we're still going to hit the target, but just that practice. And then like doing that while walking in place, like even if you're at a regular shooting shooting place, just to walk in place and try to shoot, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. You get your heart rate up. And I saw you talking somewhere else, and it's so true. Like when you get at that heightened state where you're in a reactionary kind of, act now kind of mode, boy, fine motor skills are shot unless you specifically train to do things like change magazines or whatever. That stuff's out the door. Like you're not going to reliably do anything well. You're going to drop shit you would never drop.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, you've heard me I say it all the time, and unless you're an MMA guy and you're training in a cage 8 hours a day, then yeah, of course you're fine motor skills because you're a professional athlete and that's what you do for
Right.
a living. But for the average person who works a normal job for a living, they cannot expect that their fine motor skills are going to operate the same under stress, high levels of adrenaline. And that's why it's important to, at a minimum, train those gross motor skills, those big muscle groups.
Yeah.
At least when they'll function, but you want them to function efficiently with the most power and impact as possible for whatever it is you're doing.
The point about the MMA guys and, being a SEAL or any kind of high-end operator, it's important for people to realize you guys are pros. This is what you do for a living. You train, you go to deploy, maybe rest for a little bit, and then right back to training. It's all the time. So for mom or for dad who's just driving around, what are some just go-to things? Like, if something happens, like you can only not master, you can only have so many tools at your, disposal. Like one of my things I always recommend to my friends is take something big and throw it at the enemy, whether it's a potted plant or whatever. They have to now deal with that. A chair flies across the room and is horrifying, if you have to get out of the way. What are some of those kind of things where like, look, you can't be ready for everything. Just look for these things and respond in this way. And then again, break contact, get away.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think everyone needs to, and I'm covering this too, everyone needs to determine what their nonviolent posture is, right? And your nonviolent posture, and Tony Blauer puts it best, and he's also one of the contributors. So is really, your hands in a position that looks innocent. It gives you that opportunity to show third parties and video cameras that you are not a threat, that you're not the one engaging in anything, right?
Yeah.
But really what this is a Trojan horse, right? I'm putting my hands up, I'm protecting my head, right? And then if I creep my shoulders up in the middle of that, now I'm protecting the knockout triangle. In the middle of all this, I'm putting one hand closer to my bad guy so that I can do a palm strike or whatever. I can follow with a big, strong right, whether it's palm or fist. But I think you determine what your nonviolent posture is, and then you train it. So what I do, just something simple, like I have a mirror that when I walk out my house each day, it's like a full body, right? And I do my posture, and then I go straight to a pistol draw. I'll do my posture straight to my blade. I do a posture straight to a strike. And you just do little reps before you walk out the door each day. And the amount of times that we walk out our houses ends up being, I mean, heck, it's hundreds of reps per day. And I would say that, for person versus person conflict or that potential, start doing that. Integrate that into your day. If you're not a person who carries a gun or a knife, that's okay. Just get that. What is your nonviolent? Your nonviolent posture can be your thumbs hooked in your pants. As long as you know that, okay, my hand, when it's in my pants, I can strike a groin super quick from that position, right? And then now I can go up and do something else. But there is no real right or wrong to the nonviolent posture. It can be this, like the thinking pose. And from here, I know that I can, reach out and hit someone, but know what that is. Train it in a mirror, do your reps before you walk out the door. And over time, by repetitions comes speed. And with speed, you're putting time on your side. time on your side gives you options. Options increases life, the survivability piece. So now, things that you can do that your everyday carry has become very popular, right? So for me, I've always got my handgun, my fixed blade, a tourniquet. I've got, the razor blade in my right shoe. I've got the handcuff key in my left shoe. That's pretty much the big stuff. I've always got cash, and I've got my ID, and I've got my phone and for comms, but at a minimum, that's kind of the basics. I always tell people, build a go bag, right? Have a go bag in your vehicle. You can always make sure it's within arm's reach. And when I say arm's reach, that means assume your car is upside down. You've been in a horrible accident. You can still get to your go bag, or else it's worthless, right? So that leaves it limited to your center console. If you have a vehicle without a console, then when I was overseas, I would put it under my seat and then take one strap and hook it around my ankle of my pedal foot. Or if you're using both feet, then you got to take that into consideration. That way, if you're upside down, I crawl out, that thing's going to drag out with me. But
let me jump in here and say one more thing too.
Yeah.
If your car goes upside down, how are you going to get out? Like I had a race car, and you could only get out maybe two ways, if the car was upside down. So you had to think through like, okay, so like when your car is upside down, what are your windows? And most cars have a shitload of windows, but if you're in a cargo van or whatever, being able to know how to get out of your vehicle, that's an important consideration.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, you hope that the windows are already broken and it just makes it easy, but you have to think, okay, the window's not going down. How do you break glass? It's easier to do it with a tool than with your foot. And if your foot's up above you, you're not going to get to it too well. Cutting the seat belt. There's a lot of considerations, but I think people get the point. And the go bag inside, really, the way I look at it is life support items, right?
Yeah.
So you've got med gear, you've got meds. If you take meds on a daily or regular basis, it's like a priority piece. You've got some water, you've got some food, you got, a day or two worth of gear that, promotes survivability, navigation, comms, obviously like backups for all that. But, it sounds all crazy and paranoid, but really I just did a video on YouTube like, hey, just the stuff in your junk drawers in your house can build a really good go bag.
Yeah.
People have all this stuff that sits in drawers or sits wherever. They never use it. Just consolidate it all, and you'd be surprised on how all that stuff is just sitting around actually becomes great tools when you need it. But yeah, those are kind of, my quick thoughts on all that preparedness piece, especially when you're walking out the door.
Yeah. I like your day-to-day walking around kit. Like when I was deployed, as an intelligence gatherer, my main job was to gather intelligence. So my kit was built on that. It took a while to kind of streamline it, right? But I didn't need to carry a bunch of extra weight.
Yeah.
So I carried a Leatherman multi-tool, I carried a strap cutter, and I carried backup pens and a notebook, and then whatever kind of gun I was allowed to carry, at that time. Now that was about it, because there was usually some kind of forceful element, a dude, a sergeant, an NCO attached to me that would watch my back for me, because my job is focused directly on the person I'm talking to. So, and then if anything, I would carry extra ammo for other people, because that's where my load capacity would be, because it doesn't do me any good to carry. I don't know. People always say, what kind of knife do you carry? Do you carry a Gurkha knife? Like, no, I don't need a Gurkha knife. That weight is extra weight. Like, is it extra water? Is it, extra food, whatever it's going to be, depending on where you're at. That kit, that personal day-to-day kit. So someone who is in an area where you can't get a concealed carry permit, what are some things that you can carry so that you don't actually have to wear cargo pants full of cargo, so that you can actually run a day-to-day life?
Yeah. I mean, I would always default back to a fixed blade, and if you don't want to carry a fixed blade knife because of comfort, then you can do a folder, but let's face it, a folding knife is a broken knife if you think about it. So fixed blade is always kind of like a go-to. You got to check the blade length for each state and know what you can get away with, but that is definitely the way to go. And the reality is sometimes when I'm running my different scenarios through my head on what I would do, my knife tends to be almost like the primary, because it's quicker on the draw than a gun. Guns have all kinds of legal ramifications as soon as you pull the trigger, even if you're right.
Yeah.
Whereas when you defend yourself with a knife that is within legal limits, then there's usually less of all of the bureaucracy piece. Because the reality is you can't put those bullets back in the barrel. And if you don't have that concealed carry insurance and all this liability stuff, then, you know, you can find yourself in a nightmare civil suit, even though you were right. So that's the unfortunate piece. But there are lots of education, lots of ways out there if you carry a gun. If you don't, okay, the fixed blade. I always tell people, you know, skip the mace and go straight to bear spray when you have the opportunity. It shoots 30, 40 feet. It's far more potent. It's all natural, so it doesn't cause any permanent damage. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the legal issues, especially in your home, right? If you're going to protect the home and you don't have guns, then bear spray is great. Second to that would be like oven cleaner, because it's a corrosive and it'll burn people's eyes to the point where they'll be blind for the rest of their life. And that would be awesome to do to a bad guy, right? And since it's in your own home, then it's okay. But the minute you put that crap in your purse, it's a felony in some states. So
right. wasp
spray and oven spray and all those corrosives and stuff, you don't let them leave your house. Is a self-defense weapon. So, but, you know, the other pieces, you know, that I think are important is, you know, regardless of your level of fighting and skills, you know that if you get it to a point where you have to temporarily surrender, that's okay. Knowing that you're going to stay conscious because you're outnumbered, outgunned, whatever it is that's going on in front of you. The goal is to stay conscious so that you can pay attention to what's going on and also promote escape later. And that's where the handcuff key and the razor blade, what you can't get out of one, you can get out of with the other, almost guaranteed, no matter what the restraint is. And you always want to try and get away at the first stop. Don't wait until you get home. You want the first stop sign, the first stoplight, whatever it is, that's where you want to go. Because the real restraints always go on later, and that's what you want to avoid. So, you know, some people are like, fight to the death. And I'm like, okay, let's be realistic here. Based on the average person, it might be a temporary surrender so you can escape 10 minutes later and stay alive and stay conscious, which is the ultimate goal. But other things to carry that are kind of more on the defensive side, a portion of this next book is 1%ers. 1%ers have this figured out. A 1%er is outlaw motorcycle clubs, right? That's your Hells Angels, your Banditos, you know, your Mongols. These are guys that some of them have records. Because they have a record, they can't carry a gun. So what do? They get creative with the things they carry, which certainly bleeds through to the average person should start carrying, whether it's saps and blackjacks, even brass knuckles are legal in Texas now. Those are great alternatives. If maybe you don't have a big punch, but as soon as you add something to the punch, now you do. And that's really not a bad deal. And then, of course, the padlock with a bandana run through it. You know, that is definitely a characteristic to one of those 1% clubs that they use on a regular basis. There was even one guy that had his chopper, American-made motorcycle, right? And he's having me look at it. And he's like, "Look, do you see any weapons?" I'm like, kind of staring at him, like, "No, I don't really see a weapon."
Yeah.
And down the fork of his bike, he had 2 magnets, and then magnetized to that was a lawnmower blade, right? And then he had a tape handle, and you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
But I was like, damn, that's actually pretty brutal. Like just going after somebody with that, like a machete, except it's, you know, these are things you can buy anywhere, and anything, the reality is anything can be a weapon as long as you train with it. It goes back to training again. So anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, but it's a good tangent because there are plain day-to-day things that you can have with you, you know, like you always play softball, and that way you can have, you know, a bat and other stuff in there that relates to softball, and you're 100% legit because you're a softball player. Even if you never use it, it can be part of your go bag. Another one I'm a fan of are jumper cables. To know where they are, you start wielding jumper cables at all, you've got a distance weapon you can wing around, you know, you can take it and fold it. And if you get hit with that cable, that ain't fun.
Yeah.
You know, and if they grab it, it's just a different kind of weapon. Anyhow, it's a lot of day-to-day things. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
I want to transition away from all that. It's so much fun to talk about. We could do it all day, but the point is get Clint's books. Got the link right there for Amazon. He's got all of the different 100 series. If you're a guy that likes to read on the grapper, that is officially the best book to do. So definitely get those. But let's talk about how the heck an operator at your level, how do you become an author, especially given the fact that SEALs, they the quiet professionals type, they don't like you guys writing books, but here you are making a living as an author, consultant, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, silent professional and all that certainly applies when you're active duty and your paycheck comes from the United States government. The day that all that ends, which was the day I retired after 20 plus years, that's when it's like I'm not going to follow government rules when I'm not under the government's thumb anymore. And personally, I couldn't wait to get out from underneath that leash. So, I love the job. I love what I did. But the reality is you give 20 years to your country, and then when it's time to move on, a lot of those rules that apply don't apply anymore. I was definitely a quiet professional while I was in. But then once you get out, it's all on you to figure out how you're going to pay your bills and live the next several phases of your life. That 20 years, hopefully, if I live long enough, will only be a quarter of my life. We all should be striving to create, other passions, other careers, other opportunities for as long as we live, and so knowing that, what's funny is I had no intentions of writing books, but somebody came to me and was like, "Hey, do you want to put a book together? Put a book together as a pair?" And I was like, "Sure." And he had a ton of experience. He wasn't a SEAL or anything. He's just a well-known author at that time. And I was like, "Yeah, all right, I'll." And then I figured I'd be the co-author and. Well, anyway, long story short, he ended up having health issues, and the first 100 Deli skill book, he bailed on me. I like to give him crap for it, but it was a legitimate health issue. He ended up having surgery, and he had to just pull out 100%. And then I was like, wait a minute, how do I do this? So, and this was right at the beginning, skill number 1, and I had 100 left or 99 more to go, and I was like, oh, this is fun. So anyway, figured it out and got it done hand in hand with an illustrator. And, goes to show like how important safety and security has become to some people, because the first 100 Deli skill book sat on the New York Times list for like 8 months straight. And who would have thought, right?
Right. Good for you, by the way.
It's a picture book, it's like, so a lot of the thoughts that we had on it was like, goes back to what you and I were kind of talking about a minute ago, is when you have to keep it simple. And you'll hear me, I've been quoted saying this 1,000 times, is that you keep it simple because crisis will complicate the rest. Right. And so that book, it's a how-to book. It's illustrated. And then it's got narrative. The narrative supports the illustrations. You put it all together and the skill. Now all you got to do is go out and do it. And that's the part you can't really help people with. But yeah, who would have thought? And and it's a big taboo thing for SEALs to be writing books. But so far I haven't been, completely blackballed yet. So that's good.
Yeah. I'm positive you're fine.
Yeah. It's guys. I think a lot of guys have given it as gifts, because it's a great gift book, So, and it's timeless. I made sure that there's nothing in there that's actually going to kind of null and void itself out, So it's nice, simple skills that keep you ahead of any threat out there.
One of the things that I've learned over the years, and I've talked to a lot of our peers who've been outside the wire quite a bit, and I'll ask you the question, but the premise of this question I'm actually going to ask you is, most of us agree that primarily what we do in combat zones is have conversations, right? So yes, there's combat times, and basically the question is, have you shot more rounds in combat, or have more conversations. And I know for almost everybody, it's the conversation part, which I think is important for us to realize when we look at preparedness, the things that actually matter moment to moment that might make the difference to prevent you from even getting into that combative situation are often other skills that we have to keep our eyes on too. So I guess, what would you say? More rounds for conversations in combat, and then two, what are some of these less sexy things that are hyper important? I mean, the negotiation skill is invaluable to staying out of conflict.
Yeah. Well, we have a funny saying in the SEAL teams where, people always ask, why don't you guys have language skills? It's because we're never actually going anywhere to talk, right? We don't go to language schools. We kind of pride ourselves in tongue in cheek about it all the time because we're never going to go anywhere to actually talk. So,
That's true.
but I get what you're saying. What the conversations that take place definitely more often than you're pulling the trigger is, with your buddies. And, we did have moments of like FID oriented stuff, but that's
Right.
not our primary. There's other
Right.
people that do that far better. But we did get roped into it from time to time, even though we fought it, tooth and nail. But I would say that, yeah, having an ability to relate culturally is certainly an incredible skill to have. And I think it applies to everyone. Cultural awareness in itself can help with threat reduction, right? If you're not saying things that offend people, you're not wearing things that offend people, and you're not doing things that offend people, then you just at its most basic level, you are in neutral with people that observe you, right? We all have the ability to judge and scrutinize people we don't even know. We do it all the time when you're sitting in the international terminal at the airport and you're watching people all day long. And I love doing that. And you notice people and you go, okay, now why did I notice that person? And oh yeah, that other person that just skated by in the background, why didn't I notice him or her? Right? Those gray people. And so it goes back to like, how do you be more of that gray person? When you're not on the trigger, you should be the gray person. And I think that relating back to your question is, what is that thing that people don't think about that is really important? Cultural awareness and being the gray person. But you can't be gray if you don't understand the culture in which you're in. And that applies right here in the United States. I mean, we are a mixing bowl. So whether you're in New York City or parts of New York City, understanding the culture for that geographical location helps reduce the threats and how people perceive you. And if they perceive you at basis as neutral, then you're probably going to be okay on eliminating at least some of the threats that potentially just threaten you because, oh, you're wearing some big logoed hoodie, and that somebody wants that logoed hoodie. Somebody wants that expensive, I love Panerai watches like the next guy because it's the original Frogman watch that,
Right.
now is priced way, way out there because Schwarzenegger and Stallone wear them. But, I can't. I love wearing my Panerai, but I know that there's times when you can't because, well, that stands out, especially when you're traveling. People now know what it is. Back when I bought mine, nobody knew what the hell the thing was. But anyway, it's I think there's being the great person should be everybody's goal, and then taking cultural awareness a little more serious than the average. It will certainly help you no matter where you are on this planet.
Now that's a big point. And as a spy, that's part of how I make my living, at least when I did that kind of thing, was staying alive by being culturally savvy. I can protect myself with the culture of the area, which isn't something I recommend anybody else try to do because I'm a professional. But those questions that you can ask that put you in a better position. I was in Paris with my girlfriend. We were out late one night, and I think the next day is the final day of the Tour de France. So they're all going to be riding around Paris. And so everybody's out celebrating in anticipation of this day and everything. And we went to a crepe shop, and it was full of all these tiny little French dudes. And we walked in, and we're trying to get crepes. And I speak a little bit of French. And it turned into this, like they gave us our crepes and said we had to eat them there. And they locked the door to the restaurant. And this is like a really thin shotgun style restaurant. place. There's not really a place to sit down and eat. And it was full of people at like 3 a.m. We're like, no, we're good. We're just going to walk around. And they weren't going to let us leave. And so I had to, and my girlfriend's one to like spit first, ask questions later, and elevate the situation.
Yeah.
And so this is my girlfriend at the time. She's not my girlfriend anymore. Ultimately, long story short with this is I kept my hands behind my back because I didn't want anybody to be able to say they saw me through a punch. And at one point they said that I was punching people, and I was able to show the officer, I'm look at my hands. I've not punched anybody. And the guy's like, okay, fair enough. You haven't punched anybody. They were poking me with like, the thing that you pull down the shutter for the store with. They were poking me with that like I was the white whale, because these are all little 5'7" dudes, and I'm 6 foot, probably wearing boots 6'1", and I'm pretty intimidating. So we got arrested. We got detained by the police. And, I don't speak enough French to get us out of this situation. But and this took hours and hours. They called an interpreter who was this Indian dude, and he came from the coast. He was out by Normandy or somewhere. And he comes in and he's talking to me, and he's really upset because he had to leave his family on vacation. He literally had on a Hawaiian shirt, So I'm trying to get this guy calmed down. And this is something I actually can do because this guy speaks English. And so we were talking a little bit. And then I asked him the most important question. I didn't know. I was trying to find out what it was, but once I unlocked the lock, it was unlocked. And I said, are you from Bangalore? And he said, how did you know? It didn't matter what his answer was going to be. I happened to guess good enough with his accent, and I've got some regional knowledge of that. Yeah. But that completely changed his temperament towards us. And he said, I want you not to worry. You were good people. I instantly became good people because I asked him about where he came from and got lucky to nail it, Yeah. I picked the city that's got millions and millions of people in it. It wasn't all that hard of a guess. I could have said Mumbai, but I didn't. And man, I tell you, Clint, that changed everything about what we were doing, because my girlfriend was no help at all, because she just tried to be hysterical, and that wasn't working. But that's ultimately what led to them. And then the police came, and they're like, yeah, you guys were fine. Just go. We missed our flight. We had to go to the hospital because she got hurt in the melee. But man, I was never going to fight my way out of that situation. It would have only gotten worse.
Yeah, no, and that supports, like, when I was teaching stuff like this up in DC there for a while, I'd always tell people the business card you collect from the average person, that card becomes more valuable than the phone number to the embassy. That person will help you faster than the embassy. Like, it is without a doubt, you making friends and making sure you've got allies is really the goal of every day that you walk on those streets. And then that way you've got, it's a safeguard to a certain degree, as you know. So
yeah, when that sheikh or that elder says, you can come with me, you're under my protection, you have to just at that point say, in our line of work, you go, yeah, of course, let's go. And you don't show a moment of hesitation because they've given you something very special. Again, not recommended for folks who don't go do that, but you really can protect yourself with the culture of the area. And really, if you're some tourist who happens to be in some place where they have sheikhs and they say they're going to protect you, you're protected.
Yeah, no doubt.
Or you're already fucked and don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a Danny Pearl situation. Yeah.
Yeah. At some point sometimes it's already out of your hands. Okay. So I want to get back to the writing thing. I know you wrote your biography a little while ago. Let's talk a little bit about that. How has that book been, and what are you working on next?
So The Right Kind of Crazy. I initially didn't want to write that either, but the publisher talked me into it, and reality is, they throw a price tag out there and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Why not? I'll tell stories. Why tell stories in a book and get paid? Who's not going to say yes to that? I think it's funny though, that most people that write memoirs never admit to that part of it. Right. So, and that's exactly how the book is. It is very honest. It's very human. I knew that if I was going to put together a memoir, it wasn't going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm a badass and I'm basically a borderline superhero like some of these books read. Mine is more like, no, I was a total pussy, skinny little runt that wanted to be a ninja when I grew up, and I tell people all the time, I found out that, if you kill somebody as a ninja, it's called murder. But if you kill somebody as a SEAL, you're called a hero. So I just picked the right side of the line, right? So this book, Right Kind of Crazy, really is based on a saying. And it's really, you probably heard it before, but, bad stories or bad decisions make for great stories. So this book is full of bad decisions.
Yeah.
And so I put it all out there, probably more than what I probably should have. But people that read it, they really relate to different parts in it, whether it's, the little bit of crazy that we all have, or, being raised in a broken home, dysfunctional families, parents dying early. I mean, I went through from beginning all the way to today with that thing. And it's not about combat and all that. It's really about just human stuff. And if I talk about any of the operations, it's only so that I can get to the funny part or to the sad part within that operation that I'm really focusing on, the relationships and the people. That's what matters inside of all the sexy stuff. And so I made sure to focus on that. And that's been out for about a year, and it's doing good. It missed its marketing window because of COVID, or the Russian scandal investigations turned straight into pandemic. So all of my media just literally vaporized. At the Today Show and Fox and Friends and the things I've done for other books just like got canceled and never got rescheduled again. Yeah. So there's a lot of those books sitting on shelves. So if you guys want a funny ass book, check out Right Kind of Crazy. And now I'm working on the third of the 100 Deadly Skill Trilogy.
Right, you said that, yeah,
which is the combat edition. Pre-sales for that will start in the next couple of weeks. And man, this one was the most fun to do, because instead of Clint telling you 100 cool skills, I took the month of May in the middle of a pandemic, jumped in my adventure van, and drove from coast to coast, 11,000 miles total, visited with 17 badasses in this country, all of them experts in certain fields, so that this book delivers 100 skills that are just very devastating, right? Yeah. Just, hey, how do I just end the conflict right now? Be done. And once again, in 100 Deadly Skill fashion, it's illustrated, very simple, but you're getting it from the guys who do it for a living every day, teaching it across the country. So, and I didn't just focus on special operations guys. I mean, we got professional boxers, you've got tier 1 guys, of course. Then you've got, like I said, you've got 1%er, Hell's Angel, Bandito guys, grappling guys, shooters, both pistol, rifle, sniper. So the combat edition covers everything from hand to hand all the way to the sniper rifle. And keeping it basic, because I'm a true believer that if you master the basics, you will be advanced. And most people just want to think that they need to skip the basics and get to the cool stuff. But the reality is it's the basics that becomes the cool stuff when you get really, really good at it. And that's what this one is just going to just blow away all the other books, because it's timing. I mean, everyone needs this book right now. Yeah. And so hopefully pre-sales in the next couple of weeks, and then it'll be in your hands. Probably won't make Christmas, but it'll definitely kick off the new year. I want everyone to embrace their inner badass, because they all have it. They just don't know it.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so all operators are always working on something, training, some kind of something. So what are you working on right now? You're like, I've got to develop this skill. What's in your tool bag that's you need to improve?
Man, I've been changing up, the strong hand, weak hand philosophy. Yep. So that has been probably the best thing I've worked on, and still working on it, right? Being 2 strong hands, strong tools, to include your head, and really focusing on being ambidextrous, to be honest with you. I mean, with whether it's pistol, right? I mean, we do it a lot when you're in, but not to the extent of where those skill sets should be when you talk about civilian clothing, and conceal carry. So I highly recommend everybody create two strong hands. It makes a world of difference on your capabilities.
Yeah, you think about when you do the day-to-day things, like if you brush your teeth, try using the other hand. And if you're not sure which hand is the other hand, switch hands, and all of a sudden you'll feel it. And then I'm very naturally ambidextrous. I can throw, I can write, all those kind of things, both-handed. I throw right-handed because I'm practiced there, but I'll hit you with something left-handed. But that's just I'm a freak with that kind of thing. But even still, there are things where, like, if I change and I only do this right-handed, I force myself to do it left-handed, and I know it's protected me at times where, like, my left hand responds properly and my right, it helps. Yeah. It also shares the load, so you don't get like right arm strong, left arm small.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's good for the brain. People don't realize the cognitive skills that come with training your weak side to be strong is without a doubt going to increase the function at a cognitive level. And when you talk about agility, balance, and stability, as soon as you start training the left side of your body as an equal, or for me, left, right? 90% of the population are strong on the right. Training both sides to be strong at everything is actually big time exercise for your brain.
Yeah. If you jump, try to jump with your non-jumping foot. If you're right-handed, you probably jump with your left foot. Try jumping off of your right foot, and you'll see the difference in strength and dexterity. It's crazy. And as someone who's ambidextrous, it's really hard to change, like, and make both feet dominant with both things, kicking a soccer ball. But you're right, like, it makes your brain fire in a different way. It's that's a powerful. Okay. I'm gonna get back on switching my feet and my hands up as much as possible. We got time for one more question. Do you want to ask me anything?
I guess I think it's pretty common. I mean, have you been stuck inside where you're at, or what have you been? You're in California, right?
Yeah, I'm in Orange County. I mean, we've been inside, and we're trying to be as respectful as we can of the danger of, it's hard for guys like us because I don't fear the flu. I'm just, that's my basic mindset, right? I mean, I've been shot at and all that kind of shit. So I have to detune my lack. I'm not afraid of it, but it's a risk I can mitigate, I guess is what I would say. So I've tried to detune that to a level that's appropriate for where I live, because the culture thing matters. So, I mask up and all that stuff. And I try to not take trips that aren't absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But, Scott Husing and I drove across the nation to South Carolina and back, because veteran suicide is important, and I wanted to fight that. So we did that, and we drove 6,000 miles, and we met with all kinds of people, and we were careful about it. But so I would say I'm probably more active than most, but probably because,
Yeah. It's like, I know, it's like, it's a risk. Like, I understand how it seems like this massive risk for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about, when a lifestyle was nothing but risk, this really doesn't seem that big a deal. So, but I respect the medical side.
Yeah.
Having been an 18 Delta and gone through all the special operation medical.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I like to say is, look, I've been hit by a tank, right? Like, a tank hit me on BIOP on our car. So everything else is going to be some order below that. You're not supposed to survive that. I had all of the crazy shit,
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. When you have the new book come out, I'd love to have you back on and revisit a lot of the same people. So maybe we'll bring someone else in. Shelley Clearman was going to join us, but she got tied up in a phone call. But again, thank you. And everybody should definitely get The Right Kind of Crazy. Just from hearing Clint, he's an interesting dude. Get that book. Support us by going to the Amazon link on the page, and it'll be in the show notes for those listening on the podcast side. Thanks again, Clint. I really appreciate you. And stay safe and stay healthy.
Yeah, back at you. Thanks for having me. It's been a good time.
All right. Let me sign.